Because as I've said before, we like to sell Africa with a kind of sad story in order to get money. And it's not just the NGOs that do it, we see it everywhere. But it's not a sustainable thing. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where we're all about value-adding content for you to live a fulfilled and authentic life. Welcome back to KBs Chai, where we sit and chit-chat various topics that are relevant to Africa, African diaspora, and just Africans in general. All right, let's get into today's topic. So today's topic, we're talking about small businesses and the fact that they're not supported quite the same as they would be in the West. One thing I noticed, and it's kind of funny because in the previous videos, I said that one thing that's so attractive is how fast you can grow here. But that only works if you have a lot of capital or you have access to a lot of capital. Here it's a bit harder. We don't have much of a credit system and various other things that I'll mention, but it is quite hard to get that kickstart as a small business owner and to move from a small business to a medium size to a large size business to be able to scale essentially. So all sectors across the board here I've noticed aren't quite supportive towards small businesses, whether it's government, private sector, etc. There's not a lot of opportunities for small businesses to be able to gain large amounts of capital to grow. So when you think about it, when it comes to things such as the interest rate in order to attain a loan, they are not attractive at all. Oh my goodness, I mentioned this in videos before, but just simple lending at the bare minimum if you're borrowing in shillings, it's like swiping on a credit card for whatever it is that you need. I don't know if things have changed, but last time I had a credit card in Canada, it was 19%. Credit cards that are linked to places like Best Buy or department stores like the Bay and whatnot, those are usually like at the 19%. I think I've seen 21. It's like using one of those and swiping. It is crazy, actually. It's not quite attractive for a small business, especially when you're trying to do the numbers, if you're smart and do your due diligence prior to, and do your finances beforehand and thinking about, okay, at what point will I break even? At what point can I pay back this loan? How much do I need? Because usually, especially if you're getting into bigger industries, you're going to need large amounts of money. So you'll notice when you live in the West, there are so many different ways that you could borrow money. It's not just the bank. Here, there are not quite that many. And then there are a lot of, whether regulated or unregulated, I'm not quite sure because I don't know the industry that well, but there are a lot of loan sharks or businesses that can give you access to capital quick. There aren't as many as abroad, and the ones that are here, it's just a very, I would say, a bit shady, just because, of course, also our justice system. A topic for another day. That's going to be the tagline for KBs Chai. There's always a subtopics and a topic and a subtopic and a subtopic. But anyway, because the justice system is quite flaky, unfortunately, when you take out a loan and say, or you take out a loan or you're the person lending, it's not safe. It's not fully safe necessarily for you nor for the person lending to you 100%. It's quite easy in places with credit system. So just a heads up when it comes to that. What would be so beautiful, just a side mention, would be a point where for those in the diaspora to be able to have access to funds and capital there while investing in Africa. And I do see from the perspective of as an investor in North America, in some volatile markets where you're not quite sure, especially markets and areas you're not familiar with, nor do you invest in, to now invest your money outright, you'd need to come and visit. But it'd be nice to see a community build something. I did hear of a bank at some point, but I'm not sure how far it went. I think it was pre-COVID and now this is post-COVID, so I'm not quite sure how far it went, but I know that it was an African diaspora, predominantly African diaspora bank that was trying to really put in money towards private lending on the continent. So it would be amazing to see that. When it comes to foreign investment, there's two things I do actually want to touch on in that area. One being that there's so many NGOs that are here. There are so many, but so many of them are supporting the small scale businesses and economies, and I wouldn't even say businesses, just small scale people when it comes to farmers, like the shop owners, whomever who do need access to help, which I totally agree and understand. I think that's necessary. But there are levels of where a business will be at, whether you're a sole proprietor, you're a partnership, you're a company, you're a small company, you're a medium company, you're a large company. And I feel like there's be so much more support. And I think that there's a big gap, which is a great opportunity for someone who's just has access to a lot of capital but doesn't have the ideas and was willing to now share those ideas with others. There's that sweet spot. And I do get it. I do get it if you have a lot of capital and you want to be very smart. Obviously, do your due diligence. You want to make sure there's systems in place if anything goes wrong. And then there's systems in place for you to be able to help this business scale so that you can make more money for your initial investment. There's a lot of things missing. Be a guinea pig in an industry that's definitely growing, but there's definitely opportunity. But it's quite interesting just to see so many NGOs here, and the impact could be so much greater. So much greater. It's great to see the ones that scale large and are able to help so many. I've seen so many in terms of like farming, like for example, cluster farmers in an area in order to help them grow to a larger scale and a global scale, so they are able to provide for their family for decades and past their lifetime, which is beautiful. But there are a lot of small, medium-sized businesses that could be doing great. But I don't know if it's attractive to their investors abroad, because as I've said before, we like to sell Africa with a kind of sad story in order to get money. And it's not just the NGOs that do it, we see it everywhere, but it's not a sustainable thing, and there's so much more impact that can be done. So the other thing I want to talk about in terms of this area of foreign investments is the fact that I'm not going to lie, as a business owner here and seeing fellow business owners and other businesses that I encounter on a regular basis, because we're scared of the tax man, a lot of people do not do the proper paperwork and foundational work prior to, and therefore you could find a business running for like 10 years and they're doing amazing, but they don't have all of those legitimate things in place, the books kept. So by the time an investor wants to step in, it's like, where do you even start? Where do you position yourself? Where is the money? What does it look like? What's the profit? What are the revenues? What are the expenses? And everything is usually in someone's head. And I do understand it, at some point, of course, it's necessary, because usually when an idea is born, you're just like, I'm going to do it right now. And that's what's so attractive about living in Uganda. People are go-getters. People will do what they got to do when they got to do it. There's no excuses. There's no room and time for excuses. Things just get done, which is beautiful. But then when it now needs to be done properly and legitimately, oftentimes all of that isn't quite there. So now when someone wants to come in and pump in funds, it's just not organized. That's another thing I wanted to mention in foreign investments that I've noticed. And I'm like, yeah, definitely need to improve on that, which leads me into my last point, which is financial literacy within a business. We're not ones, like I said, to be organized when it comes to money. I don't know if it's like a fear that like it's here, I have it right now, it might leave, so I just gotta do what I gotta do with it in this moment, instead of organizing it and having a plan, a business plan for how to grow that later. I remember I was talking with an aunt and a mentor of mine many years ago, okay, not many years ago, but like maybe 3 years ago. And she mentioned, because I brought up that tagline that I think most business people know about Uganda, which was, we have the highest percentage of entrepreneurs globally within Uganda. And then she mentioned, yes, that's true, but then the fail rate after 6 months is extremely high. So we do this thing of starting businesses, which is wonderful, but after 6 months, they're not working. They're not that anyone expects you to be profitable right off the bat, but either we don't stick through to it, or we just don't simply have a plan and therefore know, when am I expected to break even? How much product will it take for me to push to break even, or clients to attain, or whatever it may be? There's just not a plan. And it's quite sad, because one thing I noticed, especially if you're under 35 in Canada, the amount of support you get as a youth, which is so funny because under 35, I'm like, are you still a youth? I'm 33, I'm like, am I still a youth? I don't know. I'm still youthful, so that's great. But there's so many, whether it's courses, programs, whatever it may be, whether you pay a little bit or it's free or there's paid for ones, whatever, but there's so much opportunity, whatever field you're in, whether it's creative, professional, whatever. There's so much access to knowledge, to more knowledge, to grow, even if you want to learn. I remember taking courses. This was through, okay, so I did my degree. I finished, I was 22 or something like that. Finished, then I pivoted. I was like, okay, I did my degree, happy, mom, dad, happy, great. Now I want to do some other things. So I remember taking a power sewing course. It was intense. It was like a 2-year, certificate compressed into 3 months. So I was there 9 to 1 p.m. every single day. And you were just learning everything about sewing, the terminology to the type, to the seams, to everything. We had to learn how to make little sample pieces. We then were, after the 3, I think it was after 2 months of like intense school, and it wasn't just sitting there. You actually were with an industrial machine. You learned how to use an industrial sewing machine, like various different things. Even just this steaming and ironing, every single industrial machine that has to do with producing clothing, you were exposed to and were able to see, or able to use. This was at George Brown. It was a free course, by the way. You did have to apply. Luckily, I got in, which was really dope. And I think, anyway, let me finish my point to bring up another point. Then at the last month, you did an internship, and I did one at Greta Constantine. If you look them up, they're a designer, a haute couture designer in Toronto. And it was just dope to work there for the 1 month. Mind you, as an intern, so I didn't have big responsibilities. They didn't trust me with everything. It's like you learn how to sew properly all of a few months ago, as much as I knew how to sew when I was a kid. But from doing their big, I think it was their 10-year celebration show where they had all these celebrities and big people from Toronto who were invited to go, and then having to work the back room of that, getting exposed to their private clients, and what it took, getting exposed to quality fabric, getting exposed to just seamstresses who were there for years. Like, that in depth, oh, I was so grateful. And I remember just being in a class when we had started, we were maybe like 20, 25 people, maybe 30. By the time we were done, because it was free, people took advantage of it and just barely were even showing up. I was like, I will ask every question. I'm here. I had my booklet, my binder. I was ready. I was like, you're crazy. This is an amazing opportunity. Then after that, I ended up applying for some other thing. I forget how I got into it, but shout out to Christopher Pawnell, who was one of my mentors and one of my teachers at one point. So he is also a couture designer, but for wedding dresses in Toronto. Beautiful, impeccable. And then while he did that during the day with his business partner, he also spent the rest of his time teaching youth. So that was where now, insert me. So I would drive from my house. It was about like 45 minutes from there, from downtown Toronto at the time. And it was weekly. It was weekly, I believe, from what I remember. And we just got to learn from him. Now I went from learning from not only Greta Constantine and my teacher at the time, a European designer. So from her to Greta Constantine to Christopher Pawnell, like I was exposed to so much stuff for free. So with that, I learned about a photography course. So I took this course, which was also, I think it was another day of the week. So I was spending many of my days there, and it was very short. This one was much shorter than the Christopher Pawnell one, which was about a year. And I just learned the basics of a DSLR. I had already owned one for many years because I had fun on YouTube with you guys and was playing around and whatnot, but like got to actually learn what all these little buttons and functions are behind the camera, how to properly light and everything. As much as I learned it on YouTube, it was nice to learn from an actual photographer and videographer. There were so many cool programs and such great support in Canada that was blended with the government and also business owners and private people who just wanted to learn more. And from that exposure, I got to do Toronto Fashion Week, not only attend, but also be in backstage. There were so many opportunities that I got that I was like, this is amazing. And it made you realize that as a business owner, you're not an island. Even as a human being, you're not an island. But as a business owner, you're definitely not an island. And you can't just expect to gain and gain without giving. And that's why I'm so, like, if you guys notice in some of my videos, I'll mention, like, it's so weird to be here and not be in a position to yet give back. So I can't wait till I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, I want to create a youth program so that they can learn all these random things that I learned. And I do see a lot of people doing that here. I have seen a lot of people doing it though who have been self-taught. They do need a little bit of like a tweak. And then I've seen people doing it here where it's impeccable. This is what you were taught. You also self-taught, and then now you're giving back. And I want to see more of that. It would be lovely to see like a government collaboration, as well as, like I said, business owners, sole proprietors, big industry players, and then just create these programs, because the youth is the future. We already know statistically, 70% of Uganda is youth. Why aren't we doing something about that? So basically, this whole video is to sum up that it's wild that there's not enough support. There's not enough support for small business owners. There's not enough support for medium-sized business owners. I don't even know about large-scale ones. I'm sure they have their hurdles and their issues. And when we're there, we'll do a video and we'll talk about it. But at the moment, it's quite interesting. At least the programs there, I got to get exposure on that. But I also, and what was so detrimental was to get exposure on financial literacy. I remember sitting down, there was a day, one of our classes with Christopher Ponnell, and we just sat down and learned how to do costing for your business. It was very simple, very straight to the point. After having a finance and economics degree, I was like, wow, it's so nice to actually sit with a business owner, and he's there like, this is cost, times it by 2, it's wholesale, times it by 2, it's retail. Simple. How do you get to the cost? This is how you, this is everything you need to consider, from the thread to the material to the bags to your labor. What do you want to be charged per hour, so that you can figure out what your salary is per year? And then you also have your employees and factoring that in, your overhead costs, everything. Then you have your cost, times it by 2. By the time you get to retail, sometimes it's like, oh, who's going to pay this much for stuff? And that's where you realize industrialization was a thing, because it reduced costs. So insightful. And it's so funny. I'll have chats with so many people here. And because I attained a lot of this knowledge over my 20s, so by the time I hit 30, I've learned a lot of random things, but to me, they feel random, but I guess it makes sense because of my industries of yes, the finance and economics degree and background, but also being like at some point in the fashion world, and then now being on the online and digital creation world, and now being a business owner again, but in a different industry. I always just feel like I'll just be talking to people. I'm like, can you imagine? They don't even, like, this is happening. They're like, you know a lot of like things. You need to like tell people these things. So hence the channel and sharing and having like discussions and conversations. But yeah, it's quite frustrating. It's quite sad to see there's no support. There's not enough support. I can't wait to see that grow over the years and decades and such. But I just feel like it's a conversation that's not being had. And I don't think a lot of people realize it unless you live in both worlds and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't okay. This is interesting. Like, something should be done. And I can't wait to be in that position for it to be done. But yeah, so far, I'm loving our conversations in KBs Chai. Please leave a comment below of what you think. Where do you live? And wherever you live, what support do you feel like you could noticeably see for small, medium-sized businesses and sole proprietors, just people just doing whatever they got to do in their house and selling their things, whether it's a weekend market or whatever it may be. Please comment below, and I'd love to see how those ideas could be brought to fruition in Africa. I would love to see it. And I think a lot of people are looking for really great ideas. They're just really quiet. You'll notice a lot of people with a lot of capital are quiet. They like to listen and they like to see where they can fit themselves in. So let's keep the conversation rolling. With that being said, don't forget to share these videos. I'm seeing the shares are going up, which means it's amazing. It means more people are finding this content relevant. They're finding the conversation relevant. So keep sharing, and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification button, and I will check you guys in my next video. Bye guys.